the device and one dongle to act like the host and sticks itself into the middle. Thanks to the virtual cabling concept, it's usually not possible to initiate a second connection to one of these devices. So an attacker using this kind of tool, or a defender using this kind of tool to assess their devices, would have to wait for an opportunity, like when the user turns off the mouse, or turns off the keyboard, or turns off the host computer and leaves the keyboard on, which is really, really common, especially if you have that model that doesn't even have a power switch, right? And then what you can do, once you have this, channel open, this man in the middle open, then you can sniff everything that goes by across them, determine things like, is authentication being used? Because if you didn't configure your man in the middle with a link key, then you know it wasn't. And is encryption being used? You could even inject stuff with a few extra lines of code. So I'm going to do a little demo of this. What I'm going to do is, I have a keyboard here connected to my victim machine, which you can't see, but that doesn't matter. You just take my word for it that it's connected. And then I'm going to temporarily turn off Bluetooth on this little old PowerBook here. And so I'm sort of simulating turning off the computer. And now this keyboard's sitting here just waiting for somebody to connect to it. So I'm going to plug in 2 dongles to my attack machine. And this is the machine you want to be watching. If I can find, there we go. And I'm going to execute this little demo. The first thing it's going to do is configure one dongle to pretend to be the keyboard, configure the other dongle to pretend to be the host. And now it's trying to use the one that's pretending to be the host to connect to the keyboard. And it just made a connection, connected to device such and such from such and such. OK, so now we're connected to the keyboard, and we're trying to initiate a connection to the host. But remember, the host Bluetooth adapter is down at the moment. So I'm going to, before I turn the host on, I want to start a HCI dump so that we have something to inspect after this whole process is over. So I'm just going to capture packets on the interface that is talking to the host. And now I'm going to turn the Bluetooth on the victim laptop here. And we should see in our other window, oh, there we go. Yeah, we got the connection to the host. We got the connection to the device. Then we got the connection to the host. And now we've got these packets going back and forth. And if I type something, you can see all those individual HID reports. And so now what I want to do is inspect what really happened by looking at this HCI dump. I'm going to, first thing I'm going to do is use T-Shark. You can use HCI dump, but T-Shark gives you some, or Wireshark gives you some more verbose output from these files. And I'm going to look for the word encryption. Encryption disabled, disabled, disabled. Encryption only for point-to-point packets happened in frame 17, which is early on in the connection, before any of those keystrokes went across. So this is a method you can use to verify that, yes, in fact, the host initiated encryption like it's supposed to. Sometimes you might find that a host doesn't initiate encryption. And it's pretty hard for you to know whether or not that's happening unless you use a tool like this to try it out. Another thing I want to show you is you can take, T-Shark will also allow you to convert an HCI dump file to a PCAP file. And then you can use BTAPTAP. And sure enough, I typed something. And and actually all that other garbage up there, I believe, was from an earlier test I did in my hotel room in getting ready for this, because the HCI dump file was appended to. So note that BTAPTAP can be used with raw baseband captures that we can get with GR Bluetooth and USRP. but it can also be used with HCI layer captures that we're getting with HCI dump. You have a question? Could you use this to differentiate between two different keyboards? The easiest way to differentiate between two different keyboards is by their Bluetooth device address. The actual characteristics of the report protocol don't vary a whole lot from keyboard to keyboard, although this keyboard is different than some. Like down at the bottom there, that 4347 is the computer asking the keyboard for a particular report that tells it its battery life. So what, 37 in hex is actually, I think, the percentage. If you convert that to the decimal, I think that's percentage of battery life in this thing. And that's something that's unique to this particular model of keyboard. So there are some characteristics there, but generally you're going to differentiate devices just by their address. So let's get back to the slides. Back to my tips. Handy tips for secure operation of Bluetooth keyboards. Beware of boot mode. Make sure that you're actually using authentication. And make sure that you're actually using encryption. And the way that you can do that is by connecting to the devices, pretending to be each other, and seeing if encryption gets negotiated. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Apple the Apple keyboard firmware attack that was implemented by, or demonstrated by Kei Chen at Black Hat last year. Which I thought was pretty amazing. He was able to, he noticed that this Apple firmware update was going over a USB right to a keyboard, and that he was able to modify that firmware in the host computer before it ships over to the keyboard. And there was actually enough room in the non-volatile memory on that keyboard to be able to put some interesting payloads in there, like a keylogger that would record the first 100 keys that you typed every morning or something like that, and store it in the keyboard itself, where it's practically undetectable to anything running on the host operating system. Kind of scary stuff. And he pointed out that the firmware update process works basically the same for both the wired keyboard and the wireless keyboard, which runs on Bluetooth. So I said, well, hey, let's try it over Bluetooth. If I run a man in the middle, then I can find out some things about how this firmware update works. One thing I noticed before even running a man in the middle at all is that there are some extra PSMs, protocol service multiplexers, running on the keyboard. These are to L2 cap basically what a port number is to TCP. So think of these as ports. Port 1 is the service discovery protocol. That's expected. Ports 17 and 19, those are in hexadecimal. 17 and 19 are the HID control and interrupt channels, which together make one HID connection. So those first three are expected, but then those two high PSMs were unexpected. And I don't even know what one of them is for, but the last one is used for the firmware update, which I determined by just man in the middling the thing. And the firmware update sequence looks something like this. It starts out with D1, D2, D4, D5, D6, D7, and then after all that negotiation, the host sends a whole lot of these D8 commands. The D8 commands have a length and an address and the data to write to the actual non-volatile memory on the keyboard, and thousands of these go by, and then it sends that DA0156, and that 56 is actually a simple checksum. So if you want to modify this, all you have to do, if you increment one of the bytes in, if you add 5 to one of the bytes of data, then you subtract 5 from that little checksum at the end. And then you get a little DB00 back from the keyboard that says, hey, I'm happy, I've got my new keyboard, and I'll reboot. And so I tried this out, and it works just fine. And just as an innocuous little test to make sure that it actually worked, I just modified a little string. It used to say Apple Inc. as a service provider on the bottom line there, but now my keyboard is, I believe, the only one on the planet that is produced by Banana Co. Hey. So yes, you can modify the firmware on these things. Yes, an attacker could, with knowledge of the device's address, connect to the device when there's an opportunity when the host is off, which is a pretty common situation, and blow malicious firmware onto the thing, just like Kei Chen has shown. There's actually more non-volatile memory on these Bluetooth devices than there is on the wired models. So there's actually more potential for malicious payloads. And fortunately, this model, which is the 3 battery version that shipped a year ago-ish, or I think it started in 2007, it does require that the attacker have the link key. Yay. The newer 2 battery version is not so picky. Yeah. So I'm going to kind of skip through this, rapidly go through this pairing section because I put it at the end for a reason, because I thought I might want to skip through it quickly and get to some questions. But you guys should know that there have been attacks demonstrated on the pairing process. A passive observer can observe a pairing and very easily brute force the pin that was used to pair, and from that process derive the link key that's used by those 2 devices. It turns out that these tools, BT Crack by Thierry Zoller and BT Pin Crack by David Holton, and also they're using this method that's proposed by this paper by Wool and Shaked, and they require the full address of the master device, the full address of the slave device, and a bunch of other parameters that are observed in the clear during the pairing process. It turns out they make some assumptions that aren't necessarily true, and I'm going to skip through this a little bit, but if you want to find out about the realities of doing this, buy me a beer. And so in summary, beware of boot mode, make sure that your devices authenticate each other, make sure that they use encryption, and you should really only pair your devices in a Faraday cage. The HID profile says that it should provide a clear value-added security benefit to Bluetooth keyboards over existing wireless keyboards. Okay, and I thought I heard a little chuckle, but whoever was laughing probably hasn't looked at any other wireless keyboards, because I think they actually met this goal. I think these are way better than any other wireless keyboard that anybody's really looked at. But there's a lot of room for improvement, obviously. And in the future, a couple of things I want to note. One is that the one big tool that we don't have is a tool to do baseband injection. With the GR Bluetooth project, we can do baseband monitoring, but not baseband injection. If we had baseband injection, then you can pretty much ignore any advice that I might have for you. There are all sorts of attacks that become possible that would pretty much make any Bluetooth keyboard fall over, no matter how well it's implemented. So if you have a conservative security policy where you want to assume that your attacker has baseband injection, then there's really nothing you can do to protect anything that is following the HID specification. Another thing I want to mention for the future is the Bluetooth Low Energy specification, which is part of it has just been published and the rest is coming soon. It looks to me like it might be interesting to keyboard manufacturers, and it may be an opportunity to be, there probably will be a new HID profile written for it, I'm guessing, and that might be an opportunity to give us a wireless keyboard standard that we would all want. So big thanks, Josh Wright, Dominic Spill, Mike Kershaw, Kate Chen. I couldn't have done it without all these guys. And slide links and code are up on that site, I think. If it's broken, let me know. Thanks, guys. And do we have time for a couple questions? Yes? Go.
So you're putting a lot of faith in people actually being near their computers for any time. A lot of the stuff can be ignored. You can directly attack if somebody goes on a coffee break or to the restroom or out on lunch in an office environment.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't mention that, but how much of a factor does that make it easier to just make this work?
The question, if I heard it right, is how much easier is this stuff, are these attacks, considering that people tend to get up from their computers for brief periods of time and go on a coffee break or something like that. I think there's a big opportunity for physical attacks. I mean, just being able to go up to somebody's keyboard and look at their Bluetooth device address and walk away is a big win for an attacker. But But from the over-the-air interface, you're not really going to get an opportunity as an attacker to